What's up guys, it's Lorenzo with Quality Mobile Video. You may recognize this car from a previous video. It's James's 2016 Toyota Corolla. Previously we installed a set of Kenwood component speakers, a Kenwood amplifier, and a Kenwood subwoofer. What we have planned today is to put in a Pioneer DEQ S1000A and a Kenwood 4-channel amplifier. We're going to amplify the front and rear speakers and use our processor to control through an EQ and time alignment. Our final system will consist of our original Kenwood component speakers in the front, our 6x9 speakers in the rear, this 2-channel amplifier powering the existing subwoofer, and we'll be adding a 4-channel amplifier to power all of the speakers. Then our processor will provide control both in equalization and time alignment. As part of our installation, we'll have to remove the original 8-gauge cabling, run new 4-gauge cabling. We'll make a T-harness at the radio to utilize the stock speaker wire. We will not be running new speaker wire into the door, and we'll be running RCAs. Our T-harness will provide the audio signals from the factory radio to the processor. Our processor will output 6 channels to our amplifiers. This will give us full control of an EQ, 31 band total, crossovers, and subwoofer level control and time alignment. We'll start by disconnecting our ground. To construct our T-harness, we have to remove the dash in the original radio. We'll use 2 Metro harnesses, a 7.0 and a 7.1. We'll solder the wires together and pull out all of the speaker wires. And there she is. Tight. Really? Holy Christ. Are you kidding me? Somebody was using a tool set to the wrong torque. Both bottom ones are insanely tight. Oh my goodness. Don't think your radio was ever coming out. These are like hand tight, and the 2 bottom ones are wrenched to hell. Fujitsu 10. To create our T-harness, we'll start with 2 Metro harnesses, the 7.0 1761 and a 7.1 1761. We'll join our wires and break out what we need. Our 7.1 harness will plug into the back of the radio, and our 7.0 harness will plug into the factory wiring. We're verifying that we have all of our conductors. That way we match every single wire within the factory connector to the aftermarket connector. That way we don't neglect a certain signal or a particular function. We are short a wire. What would it be? Uh-oh. I wonder if that'll cause a problem. Yeah, see how there's a wire right there? And our aftermarket harness does not have it. That's going to change something now. Luckily, it's the rear, so we don't really care. We verified that we have all of the conductors that we need. That way we don't neglect a particular function or capability of the radio. We do have a little bit of a problem on the rear harness because we have an individual conductor, which is a very thin wire, which is likely some sort of signal wire. But what we don't want to do is have an issue with the radio. Could very well be the steering wheel control wire. We just don't know. So what we're going to do in this case, and it's a little bit of a deviation from our original plan, is we'll use the processor. We'll get all of the audio out of the factory radio from the front speakers, but that will screw up our wiring of the rear speakers. Luckily, we can run new speaker wires because the amplifier is so close to the speakers. Yeah, and we don't have an extra wire that we could unpin. What we could do is actually depin this. So we could depin the remote turn on because we don't have it in the factory harness, which are these two bottom conductors. And we can utilize that here, repin this, and that way we can transfer the function. Interesting. They put it on here. Huh, let me, so there it is right there. So what we'll have to do is unpin this, and we'll connect this blue to this orange black. I don't have the proper de-pinning tool, but luckily this one's pretty easy. All you gotta do is there's a little tab right here. You just push it down and the wire comes out. We've already done it for the first one. So now what we'll do is, here's our missing wire, and we'll just properly line this up. We know it needs to go into this slot here, but first, don't need this secondary wire. And now, when we made them up, we have orange to blue. That way nothing gets left out. Now we just build our harness. Now that we've actually been able to replicate the factory harness, this changes what we thought we were going to do when we were in the car. So now what we can do is utilize all of the factory speaker wiring to run the new speakers. This allows us to create a full T harness where we don't have to cut or modify any factory wiring. Now some will say this is crazy to use the factory speaker wire and not run new speaker wire, but we're just trying to do an installation here where there's no modification necessary. Since our vehicle does not have a factory amp, we're just going to de-pin these as well. They're going to not be needed, and we've already taken the conductor we needed for the other harness. So there. Now our harnesses match up nicely, and no extra wires that we won't be using. We have our factory speaker wires to the front here. We have our factory signal wire to our processor here. We have our Pioneer DEQ S1000A harness. Our orange wire is our left channel input. Our brown wire is our right channel input. We have all of the speaker outputs because that does have an internal amplifier. We will not use them. When we first started assembling the harness, we kind of made a bonehead move because we forgot to solder on these power wires. So we'll have to do it now. Keep our wires from getting unruly. because the male connector goes directly into the stereo. So that's our output signal, or our input signal to the processor. So the black stripes to black stripes, that's negative, and solid color to solid color for positive. So this is the male harness that plugs in at the back of the radio. So these would be our signal to our processor. However, our processor only has a 2-channel in on the speaker and RCA inputs. So we're just going to isolate these so they don't short. And then we'll use this harness to get our speaker wires to the rear. That'll be our speaker wire. This will get capped off. We could de-pin the harness, but something may change in the future and we may want to take all the amps out and just leave the processor.
"32 hours later."
So there's that. In order to get our speaker wires from our amplifier to the front location, we're going to use this 8-conductor wire that contains the exact same color codes. We'll have a single cable that carries all of our speaker wire. Now this is 18 gauge, which, all things considered, with these speakers, this amplifier, I don't foresee any sort of problem. Now some of you will tell me I'm crazy, but 18 gauge, considering the length of wire, should be fine. That's factory speaker wire side. Oh, you no. I was like, oh, you screwed up. No, I didn't. I pretend like I know what I'm doing.
6 months later.
Alright, there it is. Our T-harness. Our harness is built, so now we need to run it. We're going to put our processor down in this lower right corner, and we're going to need to run our RCAs back to the amplifiers. So we'll have to take the right side of the vehicle apart and the left side of the vehicle apart. The left side, we're going to take out the 8-gauge wire and put in the 4-gauge wire. But this has to come out first. So now we're just disconnecting the old amplifier so we can pull the seat out so we can run all of our new wires. Here's our old 8-gauge power wire and ground, and now we'll replace it with 4-gauge because we're going to run a distribution block from 4 to 8. So the last part is to undo our zip ties and pull the wire back out. So we'll be using a 4-gauge kit from T-Spec, which is Metra. So we have a 4-gauge power, and then we'll run it to a distribution block for our amps. Fuse holder's already in. We'll use a little Tech Flex to disguise the cable, and then we'll run it along with the factory wiring. Just like our power wire, now we'll Tech Flex the ground wire. We verified that our ground is still clean. Now we'll attach our ground wire. These will be our connectors that'll go into the factory radio. Before we connect these, what we'll want to do is use a voltmeter to make sure that we do indeed have speaker connections. We'll be using some T-Spec V12 RCAs, and I'm just using strips of tape to mark them. So one will have one will have two, and one will have none. Glove. Got all our wires run, so now we just put back all the panels. Oh man, it went back together. If you remember from our previous install, we used a piece of MDF behind the seat to mount the amp. What we're going to do is we're actually going to change that out now, and we're going to do the same thing on both sides. We're going to use 1/4 inch ABS, and we're going to use some threaded nut inserts to secure the ABS directly to the back of the seat. That way we have a little bit better secure and a more permanent solution now that we're going to install 2 amps. And the biggest reason for that is now we have large gauge power wires, and we need to have a firm location to have our fused power distribution and ground distribution. To set up our amps, we're going to take out the subwoofer amplifier. It was powering just our single 12, and now we'll replace it with a piece of ABS behind. This time around, instead of using oval head sheet metal screws, we're going to use threaded nut inserts and some oval head hex screws. So we'll embed these in here on each side. We'll countersink, and then we'll mount our amps. So our previous board was only 12 inches high. So we're just going to copy that exactly onto the ABS, score it multiple times, and then snap and pop. Quarter's always hard to snap. Our previous board was 12 inches wide, so we're going to cut this one exactly 12 inches wide, which will leave us 24 inches for the other side. Using a countersink bit, we'll drill a countersink to nicely recess our screws. We've pre-drilled all our holes, and we've pre-drilled the amplifier hole, so that way our amp will sit in the exact same position. Now we'll just tighten up our board. A dead friend would say, that's buttas, yo. We'll set up the passenger side exactly the way we set up the driver's side. We've got both of our mounting plates in, so what we'll do now is tap the plastic to use these hex cap screws to hold in the amplifiers. only doing this because when we cut it with a razor blade, it wasn't quite straight. Now initially we'll leave this fuse. It's only a 60 amp, but the likelihood is because you have such a small sub, you won't have to swap it out right now. So one thing we've decided to do is we're going to swap out the subwoofer amp. Now this amplifier came with our original subwoofer package, but we do intend on building a bigger box, and we'd like to have some more power. This amplifier puts out roughly about 125 watts bridged, whereas this amplifier will do at least 300 watts at 4 ohms and about 600 watts at 2 ohms. The one thing we'll need to do is drill new holes for our mounting and avoid the holes for this original amplifier. We'll be using these aluminum rivet nuts. So what we'll need to do is once we remove this plate, we'll have to drill the hole below here and here just a little bit larger to accommodate the nut that we're going to put in the plastic. These sides are both hollow, and then we'll drill this and then we'll insert our nuts. I chose to use the aluminum ones only because they're a little bit softer, and when installing them into the ABS, didn't want to have a big bulge on the back. So when we tested it with a steel one, you can see we got a little bit of a lip and it lifted a little bit. The other thing is it kind of distorted the plastic and created just a weird kind of shape in the back. So since this is only holding down amplifiers, we decided to just use the aluminum. to feel it. I don't feel it. Here's one, there's two. We'll use the drill to just twist the wire. So what we want to do is we want So all I'm trying to do here is just get the wires equal length so that they look nice once everything is mounted. Probably net those to make them look the same. So we'll Now that one's a problem. There's a fix for it though. Now that our cables are installed, with the exception of the RCAs, the one thing we want to do is we want to pull back just a little bit of this slack underneath the seat. So typically to get these seats out, you do have to take the seat back out first and then undo this bolt. But what we'll do is we'll undo the bolt here and we should be able to pop the seat out. Throw that in the trash, don't need it anymore. Just kidding. RCAs. And this is the real reason, because we wanted to be able to back this tape off. Then we wanted to toss some heat shrink and just clean the RCAs up just a tad. That's really all we came to do. Zip tie it because I may need to pull. Nice. Now, some will probably tell me this is a no-no, but the reason I did it is because this way you can take an amp out and it's no big deal. So what I'm going to do is, when I pull out the radio, I'm going to plug in the harness from the amplifier side to the factory speakers, or to the factory speaker wiring, not to the radio side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a voltmeter to test and make sure that all the speaker outputs have 4 ohms, and then we'll plug in the harness and do a full test. But this way we know the outputs are safe. All I'm doing is, now that I plugged in the T-harness from the amplifier to the speakers, I'm just testing to make sure that we have basically 4 ohms on every output. That will tell me that we've wired our speakers pretty much correctly, or we've wired our speakers correct. So yeah. Now the only thing where I really regret screwing up, but I can salvage it, is this ground. That's the only thing that I really regret, because now I gotta run So this is a factory ground point. Basically in our T-harness, we isolated these. And all I'm doing is, even though there's nothing should have happened, I'm just double checking, making sure that the speaker outputs on the processor are completely isolated. That way we don't have any potential problem or an accident of blowing up a processor or something. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing on the radio side of this. So we have one harness and we have 2. So these outputs here should be completely isolated, meaning they should go to nothing. And then this way, we don't blow up the factory radio. And then this completely isolated. So they're completely isolated, which is exactly what we want. This is the airbag sensor, so. That's a good sign. Processor came on. It's a good sign. Since the DSP requires a USB connection directly from the phone to the processor, we want to put in a flush mount jack. That way we have easy access to the USB. That allows us to control the processor as well as send audio directly into the processor from the phone, bypassing the factory radio. So we'll punch out the factory knockout, and then we use a metra piece. Looks good. Yeah, works perfect. And that almost. So the way this goes is this is actually parallel here to the side of the car. So it's like a crash beam. It looks like it's a support when you see how many bolts it is. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a piece of plastic, bring it up, put 2 nut inserts, and then mount the processor. My bits are shot. how fun this will be.
The wise words of Mr. Ace Ventura. Like a glove.
An empty page, a story to write. I'm in love, you're divine, and it's all in our signs. We're going away. Get your bag, check the tag. Decision is made. Lock your door, need no more. It's already paid. Cancel your bill for a while. It's a journey for life, and I'm your right.
You didn't look at where I was standing. Yeah. I thought that we'd never meet.
Keep in mind, this system is sub $1,000. So what we did is originally when we put in the system, we were right around $350 to $400. Now, one thing we could have done differently, had we not initially installed the original system, we would have saved on the amplifier that we ended up not using with this second system. Now we have tons more power, a lot more control, and a lot better sounding sound system. Check out the video bio below where we have a list of all the products that we used, as well as all the installation materials with links to our site and Amazon. So as a recap to the system, what we did is we took out the original subwoofer amplifier. We have every intent on building an enclosure and possibly adding 2 subs or just a higher powered single sub. And the biggest thing we did is add a DSP. That gave us full control and full tuning ability of our system. That allowed us to get a flatter frequency response and give it a little bit more bass in areas we were lacking due to the enclosure size. And hopefully you guys learned a thing or two. Make sure to go to qualitymobilevideo.com for all of your car audio and video gear. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click that like button. If you disliked it, click the dislike button. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and thanks for watching.